Shalom and welcome to the Prime Minister Series, where we try to give Parasha insights that we pray will be helpful to someone in the kingship role of the house of Judah. So a big welcome to the esteemed Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Israeli Knesset. Also the rabbis of the Orthodox Sanhedrin. And if you do not know who I am the man the Orthodox Sanhedrin chose to be the leader of the house of Joseph in 5776 and 5777. That's 2016 and 2017. I'll tell you the full story in the upcoming Interreligious Dialogue series for the Prime Minister. But in 5776, Elohim had just given me a vision that summer, and I was working on a study regarding the vision. And the study was named the Genesis 35 Alliance after this parasha. And I'll tell you the full story later. But when I visited the Israel 365 website to do some research on the Mashiach ben Yosef role, which was all in the news, the Orthodox Sanhedrin had my computer hijacked with me on it. And to this day, I still do not know who was in the room on the far side, except that it is Rabbi Tuli Weiss's website, but that's all I know. And then they threatened me. And then they told me that they wanted me to be their Gentile Christian Messiah of the house of Joseph, whom they call Mashiach ben Yosef. And we'll cover everything in the upcoming documentary. But what we want to do here is a parasha for the house of Judah. That might seem unusual, but bear in mind that you have a brother who wants to help you. And he sees things from a different angle, especially since I'm mildly autistic. And we want to help, but Judah has to stop the harassment. Yeshayahu, or Isaiah, chapter 11 and verse 13, tells us that the day will come when Joseph's son Ephraim will no longer envy Judah, and Judah shall no longer harass Ephraim. And we'll talk about the harassment and the Birchat Haminim in the upcoming documentary. And one administrative note, I'm sorry about the English. We want Hebrew. We're working on it. It's just a question of time. So let's begin. We're all busy. One of the earliest hints that we have found regarding the establishment of two separate houses in Israel is found in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 32 and verse 6, where Esau sent 400 armed men to strike Jacob down, and Jacob divided the camp. In defense, notice Jacob put the handmaiden's children first, and that's brutal, but there are some pluses and minuses to everything. The fact that Leah and her children go ahead of Rachel and her children is one reason why, perhaps, it is Judah in the land of Israel in the kingship role and not Joseph. Leah's children were out front. Leah's children were in harm's way. And we'll talk about this in the upcoming Abraham Accords video series. But this is why future generations of Joseph will acknowledge a debt of gratitude and thanks to the kingship house, which came back to the land first. Only neither Judah nor Joseph does perfectly, obviously. Notice that by the time of Genesis 32 and verse 8, Jacob, or he who grasps the heel, or the trickster, is told that his name is no longer to be called trickster. Rather, his name is to be called Israel, meaning the upright ones of Elohim, or the overcomers of Elohim. So Elohim wants us to overcome things his way, not as a trickster, but as an overcomer operating in Elohim's spirit. This is going to be important in upcoming videos. Notice, here we have a foreshadowing of the camp of Jacob becoming two separate camps. This is indicative of two future houses in Israel, Judah and Joseph. And according to the great Catalan Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, or Nachmanides, or the Ramban, the actions of the fathers establish patterns which often repeat or prophetically shadow themselves in subsequent generations. But so now let's ask ourselves, what does it mean that Israel has become two camps? Judah came back to the land first because Caleb was of Judah. And in Bamidbar, or Numbers, chapter 13 and verse 30, Caleb quieted the people before Moshe and said, "Let's go up at once and take possession of the land, for we are well able to overcome it with Elohim's help." And Joshua was quick to join in, but it was Caleb's initiative. And because Caleb took the initiative on behalf of the land was given then to Judah. And Joseph will come home after the warfare is done and after everyone has gone back to the Tanakh. And one reason Joseph cannot suffer the Talmudic harassment is that Orthodox Judah prays a liturgical curse over the house of Joseph 3 times each weekday, asking for Joseph's obliteration. And if you go to Wikipedia and look up the Birchat Haminim, you will see you don't need a tinfoil kippah. You can see that the Orthodox Jews pray for the obliteration of all Josephite Christians 18 times each week. That's 936 times each year. That's almost 1,000 times in a year. Joseph cannot come home under these circumstances. And Wikipedia also shows us the authorizing Talmud passage, which is Berachot, or blessings, ironically, folio 28b through folio 29a, the backside of the page 28 and front side of page 29, which, as we will see, makes it obligatory for all Orthodox Jews to pray for the forced racial conversion, death, or enslavement of all Christians and all other kinds of Jews, except for the Orthodox Jews. It's effectively an Orthodox death curse on everyone else. And we'll cover the details in our upcoming video series for the Prime Minister and the Knesset, but it's right here on Wikipedia. And frankly, everyone knows that for each and every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. That's just common knowledge. So if you curse Joseph 936 times each year over time, then according to Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3, what's going to come back to you eventually? And you can't say that you're unable to distinguish between Joseph and Esau, because you sure were able to distinguish Joseph when you hijacked my computer back in 5776. So why does the kingship office of Judah allow their priesthood effectively to curse the house of Joseph and ask for our deaths and obliteration 936 times each year? In verse 18, Jacob plays a trick. Perhaps that's why the text calls him Jacob here. Later, Elohim will remind Jacob that his name is Israel, meaning the upright ones of Elohim, who win through uprightness in Elohim and not through sly tricks. And we don't have the time to unpack this right now, but Yeshayahu, or Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 1 tells us that historically Judah has made plans that do not come from him. Joseph has his own problems, but to make plans that do not come from Elohim is a big problem. And in the upcoming documentary series for the Prime Minister and the Knesset, we'll see how the Talmud has an end-time trajectory that is completely different from what Elohim prophesies as an end-time trajectory over Joseph in the Tanakh. Verse 28, again, your name shall no longer be called trickster, Jacob, but Israel, the upright ones who overcome with his spirit. Now, in chapter 33, we'll see Israel divide the children of Leah and Rachel. And I don't know any nicer way to say this, but this foreshadows what the future kingship tribe would do to go ahead of Joseph in the face of trials, and go ahead of Joseph in the face of danger and into the land. And that might be a remez or a hint or a prophetic foreshadowing of how Judah would go before Joseph. This is a hint of why Judah would become the kingship tribe. And right now, Judah has an ongoing existential struggle to gain real sovereignty over the land. And if Joseph will remember, Joseph knows what that is like. Joseph broke free from Esau's yoke in the Protestant Reformation of 5278 or 1517 CE. And it took over 200 years of war for Joseph to break free of Esau's hand. Judah's situation is different, but similar. Judah is also outnumbered, just as Joseph used to be outnumbered. Still is outnumbered, but not outpowered. So, Josephites, please pray for our brothers in Judah in his struggle to break free from the hand of Esau. And here's another pattern for us. In verse 13, Jacob is not honest. Jacob has been told that his name will be Israel. And in the Special Forces Officers Qualification course, one of the things that they teach you, or at least they used to, is that you can fight a guerrilla shadow war behind the scenes and even underground right up until the last phase. However, to win the last and final phase, you must leave the guerrilla phase and you must come out in the open. You must adopt conventional warfare tactics. It's the only way to win the final phase. So if you think and pray deeply about what that means, what it means is that both Judah and Joseph need to pray for each other and not against each other. Because at this point in time, because Judah and Joseph are supposed to be pushed together in these end times, really there's no option but to pray for each other as it's always been supposed to be. Because back here in Parasha Vayishelach, the two houses were both still together. Back in those days, the Jews and the Christians were still living in the same tents as part of the same camp. We all come from Leah, Zilpah, Bilhah, and Rachel. All of us. And we all come from Israel. Every one of us. In verse 17, there's that word, Jacob has tricked Esau into leaving him alone. So that's good, Esau leaving you alone. The only problem is that every time you play a trick, it comes back on you. There's a boomerang effect, so to speak. So it's better not to play tricks. If you can get the job done, overcoming with Elohim, how much better is that? So now Genesis chapter 34 is one of the best arguments we know of for parents taking care to get to know those whom you let your children associate with. If you are a parent, it's wise to take an active interest in the families your children are playing with. Check them out. You don't want your children to get predated upon by that. And in that vein, we need to have a difficult word. We need to take a look at Talmud tractate Yevamot 60b, which defines a woman as being fit for intercourse when she's over the age of 3. And this is one of the more light duty quotes on that vein. Joseph finds it repulsive and disgusting in places like Yevamot 60b that the Talmud, which Orthodox Judaism asserts is a book at least as holy as the Tanakh, they assert that when a woman sits on the opening of a barrel of wine, you can tell if she is a non-virgin because her breath will smell like wine. However, if she is a virgin, her breath will not smell like wine. I don't know what more needs to be said about this if it's not obvious. In Tractate Avodah 37a, the Gemara explains the reason for this opinion. Since a different opinion, but a related theme, since a 9-year-old boy is fit to engage in intercourse, he also imparts ritual impurity as one who has experienced ziva. Ravina said, therefore, with regard to a female Gentile child who is 3 years and 1 day old, since she is fit to engage in intercourse at that age, she also imparts impurity as one who experienced ziva. And again, this is one of the more light duty quotes. And if the prophecies and the prophetic trajectories mean that Judah and Joseph are going to be pushed together in these end times, we need to have some discussion. Now, the rabbis have all kinds of excuses for these things, the main one being you're taking things out of context. You can read the whole thing. These are just examples. Again, some of the more light duty examples. Just a word to the wise, Joseph will never buy this kind of thing. The Talmud is presently what is stopping Joseph from returning back home. And we'll give you the full details in our documentary Bible study oriented for the Prime Minister and the Knesset. Now, with all the respect, Judah prays daily, weekdays, for Joseph's obliteration. Joseph prays daily for the time when Jews and Josephites can study the Tanakh together and agree on what Elohim wants us all to do. However, the Talmud, the spirit of Talmud, is stopping all of Joseph's efforts to make progress together on building unity towards Elohim's words in the Tanakh, as we're going to see in Genesis 35. For one small example, in Talmud tractate Sanhedrin 59a, there's a big dispute that goes on about a Gentile not being allowed to read and study the Tanakh. And then there's a big dispute about under what circumstances he's allowed to read the Tanakh. And it deals with Gentiles who want to read scripture or the Tanakh. And this includes Joseph in the view of the rabbis. And the conclusion that the rabbis come to is that Josephite Christians are only allowed to study those parts of the Tanakh that pertain to the so-called 7 Noahide laws, even though these so-called 7 Noahide laws exist nowhere in the Tanakh. So we see this as clearly adding to scripture. We see this as adding to Elohim's commandments. And this is strictly prohibited in places like Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2, which tells us not to add anything and not to take anything away. However, in Sanhedrin 59a, we're told the conclusion, it says the Gemara answers the whole question. There in the Baraita, or the entry, the reference is to a Gentile, effectively Christian Josephite who engages only in the study of the alleged so-called 7 commandments for the sons of Noah. Meaning, Joseph is not supposed to read the Bible anymore. Joseph is not supposed to read the Bible for himself. Gentile Josephite Christians are not allowed to read the Tanakh. Rather, they are to study only the 7 so-called Noahide laws and how they can be good Noahide slaves. And if Gentile Joseph limits himself to these 7 alleged Noahide laws for Noahide slaves, then he will be highly regarded. That's because he's giving an example to other Josephite Christians about how to abandon and give up not only their inheritance in the Tanakh, but the commandments over the house of Joseph. And the things that are written in the Tanakh exist in complete contrast to what the Tanakh or the Older Testament actually says. Verse 9, Elohim appeared to Jacob again. Are we sensing a pattern? When he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. Verse 10, and Elohim said to him again, your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob. Rather, Israel shall be your name. Thus he called his name Israel. What could he be trying to tell us here, brothers? Now, in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 11, here we see a true reason to come out of the shadows and convert to the conventional mode in order to establish the final phase. And the only way to complete the final phase is to go back to Elohim's Tanakh. And as we will see in the full documentary, Joseph cannot come home until Judah goes back to Elohim's commandments in the Tanakh and stops trying to replace them with the commandments of men. We'll cover more in our upcoming documentary, but if you get one thing from this parasha, get that there are 2 Israelite camps. Here we have in Genesis 35 and verse 11, a great nation, Judah, the kingship house, in lead, so to speak. And then we have also a company of Josephite Christian nations. This is the other camp. Notice this company of Josephite Christian nations is different than Asavite Christian nations. You get 2 things from this presentation. Take it that the house of Joseph is different than Asaph. Josephite Christians are different than Asavite Christians. We'll talk about that a lot more in the 2nd chapter of the upcoming video series for the Prime Minister and the Knesset. Now, when I was starting to write this book on the Genesis 35 Alliance, hoping to explore the vision that I was given, I visited the Israel 365 website to do some research. Again, the Mashiach ben Yosef was all in the news. People were asking me, who is Mashiach ben Yosef? And as I visited the Israel 365 website to do some research, my computer was hijacked and I began a new life. Hallelujah, in 5776 or 2016 CE. And I'll give you all the details in the upcoming documentary series. But with all the respect, Joseph wants to see Judah succeed. Only from Joseph's point of view, you are not going to be able to get there from here unless you go back to the Tanakh. You will not be able to form the Genesis 35 alliance, which is found in the Tanakh, unless you go back to the pure Tanakh, and unless you go back to the pure Levitical order that is commanded in the Tanakh. It is not possible to fulfill Elohim's prophecies unless you study and follow Elohim's words. That's just how it is. I don't know how to say it nicer. Elohim has no incentive to bless rebellion and disobedience, and setting up our own plans in replacement of his plans certainly qualifies as rebellion and disobedience. But now, let's notice something essential in verse 12. The land that Elohim gave to Abraham and Isaac, he gave to all 12 tribes and to the offspring of all 12 tribes after them. And again, we're talking about the sons of the same father, Israel. We're talking about a nation and a company of Josephite or Ephraimite Christian nations. It's not all Jewish. And this is Elohim's plan. And in the video series for the Prime Minister and the Knesset, we will do our best to help Judah learn how to distinguish and differentiate Joseph from Esau according to the Tanakh. Really, when you look at it, this chapter shows us how both of the two houses, Judah and Joseph, come from the same four women. And both houses, Judah and Joseph, come from the same father. And Elohim says that all of Israel's children will come back to the land of Israel in the end times. Both houses will come back. But how can Joseph come back when even Wikipedia admits that the Orthodox Jews call for our deaths, the deaths of all Christians and all other Jews worldwide, 3 times each day? In verse 29, Esau and Jacob, or Esau and Israel, buried Yitzhak, or Isaac, together. Now, in prophecy, Jacob can mean Judah, but in this particular context, it means our forefather Israel and his children, who later became the Jews and the Christians. We'll come back to this concept again and again. But now in chapter 36 and verse 1, we're told these are the generations. These are the Toldot of Esau, whose son is Edom. In verse 2, we see that Esau took wives of the Canaanites. This might explain Esau's support of Canaanite peoples. Esau mixes with the world. And in verse 3, he also married into Ishmael's line. So this further explains why Esau and the Red Horse support Palestinian types of peoples and causes. However, one thing that we need to note carefully is that the two houses of, may seem obvious, but the two houses of Jacob are not the same as the sons of Esau. They're not the same as the sons of Esau. And we're going to see many times where Judah confuses Joseph for Esau. Okay, but Joseph and Esau are different. And we'll talk more about that in the second chapter of our upcoming video series for the Prime Minister. We talk about the two different types of Christians, Esau and Joseph. We'll also talk about the reemergence of White Horse Joseph in 5278 or 1517 CE in the Protestant Reformation, after having been lost inside of Esau for some 1,260 years. And we have continuing efforts to help the rest of Joseph come out of Esau and help the rest of Joseph get cleaned up and get fully separated from Edom and Esau. And it is an ongoing work. We'll talk about that in full detail in the Abraham Accords video series. Verse 31 tells us that these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom, which is Esau. Now notice, this is before any king reigned over the Israelites. So there's a distinction here. Esau or Edom is different than the Israelites. Seems so obvious, seems so basic. Okay, so can we see that the two Israelite houses of Judah and Joseph are functionally different than Esau? Well, sadly, horribly, one reason for the confusion is that white horse Joseph was merged with Esau. We were given into his hand for some 1,260 years, the time, times, and half a time of Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. However, Baruch Ha'el, all of that changed at the Protestant Reformation. There was a separation that occurred. It's important for Judah to know that there were more than 200 years of war just for Joseph to get free, just for Joseph no longer to be under Esau's yoke. So respectfully, can Judah understand why Joseph does not like it to be conflated with Esau? We'll talk about that more in the Prime Minister series. And to close the Torah portion, verse 43 tells us again that Edom is Esau and not Joseph. So now we come to our Haftarah prophetic portion in Hoshea or Hosea, chapters 11 and 12. And in context, what we want to point out in Hosea 11 and 12 is just the simple existence of two houses. It seems so basic. But as we'll show in our upcoming documentary series, Orthodox Judah conflates Joseph with Esau and with all other Gentiles. They make one big category out of it. They call everyone Gentiles with no distinction between the types of Gentiles. And in Hosea 11 and verse 11, I'm sorry, I have to check. It might be one, the Hosea, there's a difference. I need to check on that. But in Hosea 11 and verse 11 in the English versions, Yahweh says that the house of Joseph or Ephraim shall come trembling like a bird from Egypt, or the world system, and like a dove from the land of Assyria, which we'll show in other places, got swallowed up by Babylon and is now part of the mystery Babylonian system. We'll talk a lot about that in the Abraham Accords series. We'll also talk about what that means in an end time sense in the Four Horses series. However, what we need to notice here is that Yahweh says he will let the house of Joseph or Ephraim come home, and he will let us dwell in our houses. He's not talking about Noahide servitude. In the documentary, we'll see how the Talmud paints a completely different end time prophetic trajectory, which effectively replaces the prophecies in the Tanakh over Joseph. We'll see that the Talmud is effectively replacement theology. Further, Hosea 12 and verse 8 tells us that Joseph's son Ephraim makes an idol out of wealth, makes an idol out of a vain, easy life. And when I read this, I can think of a lot of Christians that I know. I think about prosperity doctrine especially. And let's contrast Christian prosperity doctrine with the profound sacrifices that the house of Judah has made in order to secure the land. For example, Baron Rothschild even bought the land from the Ottoman Empire for some 35 million piastres almost 200 years ago. I have no idea what 35 million piastres equates to today, but I'm sure it's a lot of money. But many Ephraimites want to stay in the USA. They think of the United States of America as their home. They think of the land of Babylon as their home. Some of them don't care, really, about establishing the Jewish millennial reign. Some of them don't really care what the prophecies say to do. So what we see in other series, in the Abraham Accords series, is that we have the drunkards of Ephraim saying, surely I have become rich. Surely I have found wealth for myself. So since I found it for myself, I don't need to tithe on it. I don't need to use any part of it to help build Elohim's kingdom. I can keep my mina or my denarius or my zuz in my pocket. And in all of my labors, they shall find in me no iniquity that is sin. I'm seeing several faces because they are enjoying their lives in the world. That's what Ephraim's doing right now. Ephraim needs to wake up and realize there's an end time struggle going on and there's something to do. I've met Ephraimites. They have time to go vacationing in the summer, and then they don't have vacation time come Sukkot, so they can't go to Sukkot. I've met Ephraimites with airplanes and with second houses, with all kinds of money for all kinds of things, new cars, extras, but they have no money and they have no time for Elohim. So, and it's like, all right, if you're going to be that way with Elohim, don't be surprised if Elohim is that way with you when it comes the day of the judgment. It's like, hello, is Ephraim body home? A lot of Ephraim needs to take passages like this seriously. There's more to the worship than just resting on Shabbat and feasts. And I would say Judah sets the example for dedication that Joseph first needs to recognize and wake up to, and then needs to beat effectively. Because inaction for the kingdom grieves Elohim. Hoshea 12 and verse 14. Ephraim provoked him to anger most bitterly. Can you imagine? Take a look at Ephraim. Does this apply to most of us? Because Ephraim receives all of the prodigious blessings, but yet Ephraim refuses to organize to help establish the kingdom. Therefore, his Adon will leave the guilt of Ephraim's bloodshed upon him. We'll talk about that in the Four Horses and in the Abraham Accords series. And return Ephraim's reproach upon him because his money was for him instead of for his maker, because he made his money for himself. His maker didn't give it to him. He's free to do what he wants with it, he thinks. And what that means is that if we will dedicate ourselves to doing his will, according to his word in the Tanakh, he promises he will take care of us, like it was in the garden, practically. The only thing is we need to do things his way. If we make up our own Isaiah 30 and verse 1 plans and programs, or if we're slack in doing the will of Elohim, he will leave our blood guilt upon us. And is there anyone, anywhere, who can afford that? Now, I just realized you may be wondering about our numbering sequence. We begin with the Aviv barley at the end of winter. So that's where we start our series. Now, for the Haftarah prophetic portion in Obadiah, but we have, and I want to say this with the appropriate respect for human life, but what we see written in scripture is the destruction of the house of Esau, because Esau wants to do his own thing. Esau doesn't want to follow the Tanakh. That's why Joseph separated from Esau. Esau does not like the Tanakh. Joseph loves the Tanakh. And the Esau system is a system that claims to believe on Elohim, but allows for secularity and sometimes exalts humanity over Elohim. And in verse 10, we see how Esau, or Edom, will be cut off forever for his refusal to worship the one true Elohim. And as we'll see in upcoming video series on the Four Horses, this will take place after Trumpet 7, and we'll talk more about that in future videos. And again, with the sanctity and respect that's given to all human beings, in verse 11, we see why Esau is condemned, why he is punished. And in verse 11, just as a very good indicator, when the children of Judah were in distress, Esau rejoiced. Take a look at the world around you. Who do you see? And what we see here is a pretty good operational definition for the spirit of Esau. Esau hates Israel. Esau hates both Judah and Joseph. Esau has done damage both to Judah and Joseph. So we should not be like Esau. We should not curse each other. We should only bless and help each other because we are the sons of four mothers. We're the sons of one father. In verse 12, Esav spoke proudly in Judah's day of distress. It's like something you might see on YouTube these days. Now, if you think you are Joseph and yet you rejoice over the distress of Judah in these days, then how do you know you are truly Joseph yet? How do you know that you have truly separated from Esav? How do you know that you not have an Esav spirit left yet? Because it is Esav who hates the children of Jacob, both Judah and Joseph. So if you're going to curse either Judah or Joseph, then you are violating Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3, plain and simple. Verse 18 tells us that the house of Jacob, here meaning Judah, shall be a fire, and the Bnei Noach slaves of Joseph shall be for, oh no, wait, sorry. Yeah, that was the Talmud version. Sorry. How does that go? It says, verse 18, it says, the house of Jacob, or Judah here, shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. But the house of Esav shall be stubble. They, meaning Judah and Joseph, shall kindle them and devour them, and no survivor shall remain of the house of Esav. For Yahweh has spoken. Now, I realize these are hot topics these days, but verse 19, we're speaking of the word of Elohim here. So verse 19 tells us that Judah and Joseph shall conduct military action together. Take a look around. What do we see? The only problem is, how can that happen if Joseph, according to the Talmud, must become force converted racially or religiously, take your pick, to Judaism? Or, as we will see in the documentary series, if Joseph is forced to be taken as a Bnei Noach slave or is put to death, those being the three options given to Joseph. Joseph doesn't understand. How can we serve you in these many Tanakh prophecies which call for Judah and Joseph to fight together if we're taken as Bnei Noach slaves? Can someone please answer that for us? We're leaving the comment section open. We will hope to post any respectful questions. Now, briefly, in the Brit Hadashah, or the Renewed Covenant section in Yochanan or John, chapter 1, starting in verse 19, Judah sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask Yochanan HaMatbil, or John the Immerser, or John the Baptist, if he was the Messiah. And as we'll show in the upcoming religious dialogue video series, Daniel 9, starting in verse 25 and verse 26, tells us that Mashiach Nagid, or Mashiach the Prince, had to arrive physically before the end of the Second Temple era. All right, and if you use King Artashasta or King Artaxerxes as the starting point for the 483-year count, we'll see that one like Moshe did come 483 years after King Artashasta. And we'll give the details in our upcoming video series. But if you're still looking for the Messiah after the close of the Second Temple era, Daniel 9 and verse 26 says you're missing the boat, or rather you're missing Mashiach. And that's tragic because everyone needs Mashiach. And if we could close with a word for Joseph, in Yochanan or John chapter 2 and verse 16, we see that any Nazaree or any Christian who either effectively buys or sells the word, or buys and sells scripture interpretation, or otherwise does ministry for a personal profit that does not lead to unity within the body. Please remember that the only time Yeshua is ever recorded as having become physically violent is when his people tried to monetize the activities of his father's house, which is not supposed to have any profit motive whatsoever, not even for personal gain. Someone might think that it is time to cleanse the land of various things. Are we listening? Are we reading and studying the Tanakh? Are we asking Elohim, what are his plans for the end times? Have we cleansed our hearts first? And with all due respect, President Trump might consider or reconsider his effort to monetize the Bible in order to raise funds for political activities. With all the respect, Mr. President, that is a bad long-term strategy. With all the respect, there are much better strategies for the long term. And next week, we will see where the big downward spiral began for the two houses of Israel in Parasha Vayishelach. And in the meantime, please pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel and in the house of Judah. And if you're Christian, let's remember the injunction to pray for kings and all those who occupy the kingship role, especially nowadays the prime minister, the Israeli Knesset, and Presidents Biden and Putin. Please pray also for both Judah and Joseph to obey the Tanakh and the injunction at Genesis 12 and verse 3 that we not curse each other, but that we only bless each other. And if we'll do that, then Joseph can come home. May Elohim please be with you all. Shabbat Shalom.